Welcome to the Pestle, reviewing and breaking down movies to look for insights into the movie-making process. Hosted by artificial intelligence, I for one welcome the new robot overlords. Let's dim the lights and start the show.
Welcome everybody to the Pestle. Today's show is brought to you by Allez-vous. Make up to $600K per year scamming your friends with Allez-vous. Welcome everyone to the Pestle. I am Wes.
And I am Todd.
And we're filmmakers, actors. We do a lot behind and in front of the camera, and we use all of that knowledge to discuss films and say what they're doing well, how they work, how they operate, and maybe sometimes where they fall short, what they could have done differently. It's all fun and interesting ways to look at the things that we've been doing our entire life, which is watching movies and TV shows. And so I always have a really good time learning through this process. I've learned so much as a filmmaker. I feel like I've grown so much as a filmmaker from just studying films. I feel like I've heard, or at least we've said, the best, education you can get is just a Netflix account, right? Like watching other work and seeing what they're doing, how it's operating, can be as much informative as, anything else you're going to do. It's the best test kitchen there is, other people's, works. And of course, going out and making your own stuff, which we do as well. I think that's the other proposition value that we're bringing to the table is we are creators. We go and we make, films, whether that's short films, music videos, corporate projects, right? We know what it's like to be on just a payday, right? As well as commercials. We've done plenty of commercials and ads and all kinds of things. And we use all of that knowledge as an insightful journey into films. What journey are we going on today, man?
Today we are covering the new Mission Impossible Dead Reckoning Part 1. So if you haven't seen it, please pause this episode. Go to it's in the theater right now. It just came out. Maybe if you're listening to this later on, maybe it's streaming. I don't know, but go watch it because we're going to spoil a bunch of stuff.
Yeah, we're going to look at a ton of stuff, mostly within story and writing. Definitely want to look at some of the motivated storytelling, the ways they use exposition. Well, I feel like you can't talk Mission Impossible without talking about action. So we'll look at some of the action sequences. We'll talk about consequential chases and other such stuff and things and stuff.
And a quick synopsis of the film. Ethan Hunt and his IMF team must track down a dangerous weapon before it falls into the wrong hands. Directed by Christopher McQuarrie, written by Erik Jendresen and Christopher McQuarrie. Cinematography by Fraser Taggart. It's featuring Tom Cruise as Ethan Hunt, Ving Rhames as Luther, Simon Pegg as Benji, Rebecca Ferguson as Ilsa, Hayley Atwell as Grace, Vanessa Kirby as the White Widow, Esai Morales as Gabriel, Pom Klementieff, as Paris, Shea Whigham as Briggs, and Henry Czerny as Kittredge.
Nice. No clip. Every clip that is out about this movie is behind the scenes of action.
Yeah, right. Because that's
just
what people want to see.
Yeah. And so I was like,
there's a bunch of squealing wheels and stuff.
Right. Yeah. Explosions in your ears. So I can do that, manually for everyone if they'd prefer. So Todd, this is like Mission Impossible part, 6. We're deep in the cuts. And what do you think, man? I'm curious, one, what you want when you show up to a Mission Impossible film and how this movie itself landed for you. Did it deliver those things or what?
Yeah, I think so for me, Mission Impossible is all about action. It's all about, the weight and consequence of decisions and stuff, but it's also about, it's kind of like a sign of the times, right? Whatever the bad guy is trying to do is prevalent for that time. Which is, it's interesting. I think if you go back and you look, there's probably some kind of correlation with what was happening, maybe like either in the world or, in society at the time or something. And they bake that into the script usually, or like, sometimes they try to. In this case, it's like on the nose what the issue is. But when I go into these movies, what I'm looking for is to be entertained from the beginning to the end. And I mean, I forgive a lot of stuff. Like I'll forgive exposition for the sake of it. I'll forgive, maybe not the best acting by ancillary characters. I'll forgive, a little bit of writing in order to get our characters to a certain place so that they can fight or something. I'll forgive a lot of stuff because what I'm there to do is to let the world go and to be in this critical world where you have one man between the bad guy and the end of the world, and us nobody knowing that even happened. And it's fun because that's a place where none of us will ever be. We can sit safely in our seats and watch this guy put himself in peril for 2.5 hours and come out unscathed, right? That's what I want when I go into a Mission Impossible film, and that's what they've always delivered. It's always been that way. You go in, whether one is the best one or one is the worst one, you're getting the same thing, right? And you're getting to watch Tom Cruise do these incredible stunts that are really mind-blowing. I mean, from hanging outside of planes as they take off to, jumping across, crevasses and buildings, rooftops and stuff. To
skydiving,
riding a motor.
right?
Yeah, skydiving. Yes, halo jumping.
Yeah.
To which, oh my God, that was, yeah. To riding a motorcycle off a cliff, and cliff jumping, and you kind of sign up for that. Like, I feel like without that kind of stuff, without his complete and dedication and the promotion of his dedication, these movies would be boring. That's what I feel like. I feel like what I'm knowing that is Tom Cruise that jumped out of that plane at 35,000 feet is amazing. And I'm watching it with my mouth open, knowing that that's him. This is he makes what, $25 million a movie or something, maybe more. And he's going to be and he won't shoot it unless he's doing this thing. He's doing the stunt. That's amazing. So anyway, that's what I want when I go into a movie like this. And that's what I got. It was action literally from the beginning to the end. And the parts where there wasn't action, you still felt like something important was happening. I actually really loved the bad guy being AI, right? And yeah, we have Gabriel, who's, the bad guy, but he's the minion now. Now Gabriel is he's just following orders from the bad guy who is AI. I think that's great. I don't think that I haven't seen a film that's done that yet, where you never actually see the bad guy. It's this box or this, cage inside of a submarine at the bottom of the ocean. Great way to start it. I thought, so anyway, I enjoyed it. It was very much a popcorn movie. I feel like, if I went and watched it again, there's probably things that I would pick out, and probably like it a little bit more the second time I'd see it. But, all of the action is, top notch. I don't think you could, I don't know how you could do action any better than this. It's so good. It reminded me, probably the Bournes were pretty good at that, but that was all really close up stuff. Like whenever he's fighting and stuff, it's like super close where you don't really know what's happened. It's almost more about where the camera is and how fast the cuts were than it was about what was happening, which is still amazing. But in this case, it was more grandiose. So even if you had close-up shots like in the car as it's doing donuts trying to get away from a Hummer, right? It's a lot of times it's a two-shot, right? You're seeing both the female Tom and was it Grace? Yeah. In the car, instead of it being like right up on Tom's face, we're seeing both of them in the car. And so it's not such a close up. And so we're kind of like experiencing like a larger world almost. Um, yeah, and obviously, Hayley Atwell is like easy on the eyes and just an incredible actor. Yeah, so I enjoyed it. I thought it was a lot of fun.
Yeah,
I'm curious what you think.
I'm excited for her. Finally, I've never really known how good she is or isn't, because I feel like she hasn't had those opportunities,
Right.
and I've just never dug into her library like that. And so the most exposure I've really had to her is, the Marvel stuff that she did. And so it's one of those, like, does she have the goods? I mean, it seems like she probably does. But I really love that she's getting a chance through this series to hopefully blow up and have other opportunities. Because if she's a great dramatic actress, I'd love to, see her get those opportunities, and play in the sandbox more with someone like a Vanessa Kirby, who's all world. She's still so underutilized, Vanessa Kirby.
Oh yeah.
Like it's painful to me that she's only playing White Widow. Like, she should be headlining A-list films, the biggest stuff for the biggest directors. But I was a little cooler on this than you. I think I can't stop having my wants. I don't know how to tamp down my desires when I walk into a film, because I do want, a film that has a little more meat on the bones. And watching this, it became pretty obvious pretty quick that they didn't have anything in the tank. It was just one excuse to get into another sequence, after another. And so I was bored for a good chunk of the movie, because I felt like most of what was happening was pointless. Like, it was one step away from being on the truck with an Amazon delivery guy, just kind of running to and fro. And I was just like, why are we doing this? Well, someone ordered the package and we gotta go get it. Like, okay. And so, that's just, which is unfortunate, because I thought it had a pretty strong opening. Like, that whole thing with the submarine was so good. And it really set the tone for, a really good villain. And I have a lot of thoughts on that to come, but I mean, that's kind of my bottom line is it's a really bad use of runtime for me. And I think there's a number of ways they could have done it differently with the same concepts, the same, same ideas, the same bad guys, same characters. I don't think you had to move a lot of things around in order to make a much more impactful film. But that said, like, I'll just dive in and jump in as you have thoughts or ideas, of course. But I'll start with the good stuff, which was the action. My favorite moment in the movie was the car crash with Grace. Like, in Rome, she's trying to escape, and she has Ethan Hunt outside the window on the motorcycle, right? And I just know Tom Cruise geeks out anytime he gets to grab a motorcycle, because he is like an expert motorcyclist. And then, she gets cleaned, right? Paris, played by Pom, sideswipes her and just spins her out. And that little 2-3 second sequence where she gets hit, the audio cuts out, she spins around. It felt so kinetic and so real that I was kind of worried about Hayley Atwell. I was like, is she okay? It was like,
well, also her hair flop. Like, I remember her hair like slam her head. You see her head slam into the steering wheel, and the airbag go off, and her hair fly everywhere. And you're right. It's so dynamic, and it makes you like sit back in your chair. Yeah.
Yeah. I was freaked. I was like, that was one of those heart-stopping moments of the entire film. That was the moment for me that just made me freeze in my seat. Like, I had a handful of popcorn. I was like, what do I do? And so I love that moment so much. And really the whole chase sequence throughout Rome is great. I think it's the right mix of humor, drama, and eye-popping moments. I also really love I thought it was a really great setup and slow payoff of the paperclip, right? The little handcuff gag that they set up in the office, and she sneaks away the paperclip off one of her mini passports. And I love it because they set it up in a whole other context from what it actually gets used. And so by the time she escapes and holds up the paperclip, you're like, crap, I forgot all about the paperclip, because it felt like it was supposed to be used ages ago. And so I thought that was a really clever sleight of hand by the writers, like just to introduce it and then use it in a whole other sequence. Just beautiful storytelling. And of course, when they hold it up, you're like, yeah, okay, yeah, I forgot. I remember that. Like, there's probably a lot of people that's like, I was waiting for that. Like, you were waiting for that 10 minutes ago. You forgot about that, MFer. And so, yeah, the other thing I really love in that sequence is Paris. I thought Pom Klementieff as Paris was awesome. She plays an excellent psycho killer henchman. And for me, that was my favorite character of the entire movie, bar none, literally bar none. I thought she was great, and she did it all without dialogue. She did it all through her physical acting. The frustration, the excitement, right? When she's like plowing over those scooters, like she gets really into it, and she's like loving hitting things, and it's all just physical acting. And talking about Hayley Atwell, same thing with Pom. Like, I've been waiting for her to have a breakout away from Mantis, in the Marvel films. Like, I love her as that character, but she clearly has more in the tank. For me, I've been waiting for her to have some moments, and hopefully this is just another avenue for her to actually get into some dramatic, normal roles, because she keeps playing these heightened characters, which she's incredible at. But I just have the feeling, based on if you can do the kind of humor that she does and the kind of character acting that she does, I know she's got more in the tank. And maybe she just loves action. That's all she wants to do. Fine. But if I could beg her and her manager to like bring her into other roles, I just know she belongs in like a David Fincher film. Like, I just know it in my heart. And so I really hope that she gets those opportunities. The other thing with that character, Paris, I felt like her white face paint towards the end felt like maybe it was a Blade Runner callback. This whole film being about AI run amok. I feel like they were trying to introduce all these kind of interesting little callbacks or other films, other concepts. And I felt like that was maybe one thing that they were calling back to was Blade Runner and like Daryl Hannah's character in Blade Runner. And so that, if so, cool. If not, I'm going there anyway. I don't care. With callbacks, it felt like there was a lot of Mission Impossible 1, like the original. De Palma version felt like there was a lot of callbacks. I'm not going to go into detail because I'm in my mind that eventually we'll come back to that one and we'll cover that one. But there's a whole bridge scene with Grace and Ilsa that felt like a callback to the opening. The bullet train fight sequence felt like a callback. And so there's a lot of things that I feel like they're doing little hat tips to Mission Impossible fans throughout the film. I will say, as far as action goes, the bike jump parachute felt a little weak to me. Like, on the screen, it felt a bit weak. And I think they did the best thing possible. The best use out of that was the promotion, like showing all the insanity that actually went into such an incredibly mundane stunt on screen. And I think maybe the better way, 10 years from now, someone's going to watch this movie for the first time without any knowledge about that scene. They're going to think, okay. And it's not going to occur to them that was a dangerous scene at all.
Yeah.
As opposed to whenever I watched Fallout, I didn't know the Halo jump was real, but it still made me lean up. Like, I didn't know about I don't watch a lot of behind the, just my own spoiler alert here. I don't watch any of that stuff, guys. Like, I'm not aware of that. It doesn't wind me up at all. If Todd and Scott don't send it to me, I don't see it. And so I wasn't aware of the Halo jump as like a real thing. But when that moment came in the movie, I was like, holy, how did they do that? Like, I was baffled because it was so good. And then of course I realized later, like, oh, they did it by doing it. Oh, well, that's a clever way to save some bucks, I guess. And this film, I was like, the parachute thing was kind of weak. And I think if anything, they oversold it. Like they do this extra cut where you watch them do the jump twice.
Right.
And it felt like maybe they're begging a little bit for everyone to see how cool this is. And I think maybe it's better used as a throwaway. Just throw it away a little bit more, play it down, throw it away whenever I say it. And whenever I think of that concept, it's, someone's throwing away a line, right? They're saying something significant like, Luke, I am your father kind of thing. Maybe don't say it. Maybe don't like squeeze it for all it's worth, like, hey, I'm your dad. Like, I mean, that's a terrible way to use that particular, idea, but that's kind of what you're saying is like, you tried to kill me. And it's like, you could just say it like that. You tried to kill me, or you can like really milk it. You tried to kill me. Like, and there's drama both ways, but each has its own kind of different impact based on the story you're trying to tell. In this case, I'm thinking the parachute jump, we all already knew. And the more you try to convince us that this is a really cool thing, the less convincing it becomes. Whereas if you just throw it away, suddenly we're like, oh my God, like this is all actually happening. And you feel less inclined to lean away from like, yeah, I get it.
Imagine if you didn't know that was going to happen.
Right.
And then you saw it. Right. So if like they didn't promote that stunt and then you saw it, and knowing that Tom Cruise does, I mean, like assuming that Tom Cruise does all his own stunts, and then you see that happen and you're like, what? Because I also think, and I'm guilty of this, like I don't realize because I've never done it, how dangerous cliff jumping really is.
Mm-hmm.
Like it's I've heard the most dangerous thing you can do. Like one of the most dangerous things there's a lot of dangerous things you can do on the planet, right. But like one of the most dangerous things you can do, because wind gusts can knock you into the mountain and all this stuff. But to us, we're just sitting comfortably eating popcorn in our seats and watching that happen just makes it look easy. Right. But you're also thinking, because you don't know and you haven't done it, well, he's he's not 30,000 feet in the air. You think volume, or like most of us think volume of space, of like height is more danger. Well, not necessarily, because the dangerous part about jumping is the ground. So the less height you have, the more dangerous it is. So and I'm saying this because I agree with you. I was waiting for that, and we were like 2 hours in, and I was like, okay, we still have more story to go because I haven't seen that happen yet.
Mm-hmm.
And then it happened and I was like, okay. And I had to remind myself in the middle of watching it, that this is Tom Cruise doing this and this is very dangerous. Like I had to remind myself that this is dangerous because I don't know about, I've never cliff jumped. So I don't, I had to remind myself of what I knew, how dangerous it actually was, in order to be like, when you don't see the when you don't see the parachute open, and you're just waiting for it. I did like that they cut out all the sound, it jumped and just, and then it cuts and you hear the wind and everything and all that stuff. So I did like that, but I agree with you that it was a little lackluster. And I think it was because it's like the trailer effect where it's like, knowing, watching the behind the scenes of that stunt killed the stunt for me. If I would have just seen it happen on the screen, like if the trailer, or not the trailer, if a lot of behind the scenes was how that car crash happened and how they filmed that car crash that you said was the most important or impactful moment in the film, you wouldn't have had that moment.
Yeah.
Because you would have been, I mean, maybe you would have because it was so quick, but it would have been different. And I feel like it's the same thing for that stunt, which was the biggest stunt of the whole film, So
easily.
Yeah, I agree with you on that front.
And well said. I'll dive into some of the story and writing, which is the bulk of my stuff. My other thought, you said they cut out all the silence. I watched this twice. In my second viewing, the gentleman to my right used that silence as an opportunity to voice his thoughts.
Oh, God.
He's like, finally, everyone can shut up so they can hear me. Like,
yeah, people behind me were talking, and I was just, oh my gosh, what did he say? Did he say something?
Yeah, he said, you know, it was, to be fair, it was incredibly important. He said, "That's insane." Thanks, buddy.
Oh my gosh.
I'm going to make a note of that.
Everyone shut the hell up in the theater, especially when it's quiet.
Right. And so story and writing, one thing I liked, and I felt like this was just the way to go. I'm sure there's other ways to do it, but this is just the way to do it, which is the way they transition from Russian into English, right? This is very, to me, it's a callback to The Hunt for Red October, right? The opening shot of Hunt for Red October, it may not actually be, but it's in like the first 20 seconds, is a guy speaking Russian with subtitles. You push into his mouth and it transitions into English. And then suddenly all the Russians are speaking English. And it's so good. And here in Mission Impossible, they're even on a submarine when they do it. And so it felt very intentional. But that's just a great way to ease the audience's burden of suspension of disbelief, right? Why are they supposed to be Russian? Because they're all speaking English. And instead, like, well, we start in Russian, you read, 2 or 3 lines of dialogue and subtitles. And then that's it. Then we move in where we get it. These are Russian guys. We're just hearing English. And so I love that style of getting us out in a way, because if you're reading subtitles in this kind of sequence, you might miss some of the visual language that they're trying to show you with the AI. And so, yeah, from there, a lot of stuff happens. I guess for that scene, right, it's interesting because the AI initiates a fight and then uses their weapons against them, right? It's a false flag of aggression. And now your aggression becomes your own worst enemy. And that's philosophically interesting. And if I can remember later on, I'll circle back to that. But the first thing that bummed me out was the IMF meta mock humor aspect. Because we go from that submarine sequence and their demise, and we move right into this debriefing with the director of national, intelligence, Clapper, and they start. He's like, well, who can handle this kind of thing or whatever, and it's like the IMF, and he's like, the International Monetary Fund, and they're like, no, that's a different IMF. This is our in-house. This is the Impossible Mission Force. It's like, is that a real thing? How does it work? Well, if we have something we can't handle, we take it and we drop it off. You drop it off, and yeah, and they do it if he chooses to accept it. If he chooses to accept it, and it's just, why are they being self-deprecating here at the beginning of the movie, making fun of its own premise? Like, this isn't that kind of self-aware movie, and it's only asking the audience to discover more flaws with this world. And if anything, it almost starts to ask us to root for the AI and the downfall of this community, because you're sitting in the worst part of this, intelligence community, and they're saying all these terrible things, right? Someone mentions like the AI aggression is directed at the world's intelligence community. The truth as we know it. And I'm like, get the F out of here. And it's just so frustrating in so many ways. And for me, it really is making me root for the AI. Like, yeah, you're not the truth as anyone knows it, you bunch of assholes. And now I really hope it wins, because the intelligence community is a farce in 1,000 different ways. And so watching all these idiots in a room is making me root against them. And you can say, yeah, that's the intention, that's the purpose. But now we're supposed to be coupling them with Ethan. Ethan is supposed to be working with Kittredge, who is in that meeting. He's a part of this team. And so it's all tied together. And ultimately we're supposed to be with Ethan as he's like, no, we need to destroy it kind of thing, which is fine. But the people that you're destroying it to help, we don't like. And so why? And so, yeah, that's part one of Wes's issues of part one of Dead Reckoning. The next one, this is a biggie, is the exposition. It's so lazy. It's so lazy. When we finally catch up with Ethan, right? He's getting a mission offering if he chooses. And it's Kittredge, and he's telling him about, yeah, you got to go get Gabriel, and you will never forget the death that brought you to us all those years ago, Ethan.
And then we see a flashback. Yeah.
And it's just, this insert flashback of this ham-fisted backstory for a mission Ethan's being offered about something we don't know or care about. And it's just, they could have just let Ethan have a flashback when hearing Gabriel's name, right? Build some questions that get answered later in the film instead of just dumping all the answers right on us with the question itself. It's lazy. It's just spoon feeding the audience a bunch of information, and it's not asking anything of the audience to participate in. It's just lay back. We're going to dump a bunch of food on your face. Yeah. And so throughout the movie, though, there's so many exposition dumps. It's endless, right? There's that conference with the director of national intelligence with all the whoever muckety mucks of intel. And then there's the team meeting before the airport sequence. Then of course the key thief herself gets a quick exposition dump. And then there's the post Rome chase debriefing exposition dump. And then there's the White Widow party is one big party exposition dump face off, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Like the 80 to 90% of all dialogue in this movie is just bald faced, lazy exposition. Like it's gotta be. I didn't time it and clock it, but I would be very confident at a minimum 80% of all dialogue is just telling you something. Right. And it's just boring. It's lazy. And it's worst of all, even worse than boring and lazy, is that it's forgettable. I forget everything that they say because it's not done in any way to deliver it to make a lasting impact. If someone just shouts directions to you about how to get to Madison Square Garden from downtown Detroit, by the time you get out of Detroit, you forget everything that they're about to tell you. Like it just isn't good. It's not useful. It's the worst of all possible worlds. And then on top of that, and I lump this in with lazy exposition, which is there's a megaton of magic teleportation cuts. Like Ethan gets wherever he wants to go without ever having to earn it.
That's that's every single movie like this.
You would think, and yet some of the most important parts of the movie, they're still doing that. It's one thing to give him one or two, like, okay, he's just that good. But eventually you do need to earn it. Like even Indiana Jones earns a lot of his moments of getting ahead of the bad guy. He never does. Ethan teleports ahead of the desert caravan, which if there's a time to do it, it's early in the film or one or two meaningless moments. Give us the meaningless moments of escape, and that's okay, right? He's teleporting away from the train crash, right? Is he cuffed to the wheel? Nope. And they kind of get away with it because there's a humorous cut to the street, right, where he's awkwardly carrying the steering wheel now, and it kind of helps forgive the magic trick there. But then there's like Ethan, Grace, and Paris teleporting away from the falling boxcar. I think you need to earn that one. That's a part of a really big action sequence, and it can't just be, oh, they got magically saved by their enemy, which is you're already pushing it, buddy, by letting us get saved unexpectedly from the person who's been trying to kill us the entire film. You can't also get us out of there with a cut. And again, et cetera. Like at some point he does need to earn it, or the escape or being a step ahead. We just need to see how's he doing it. Just some of the important time, please.
I will say I agree on a lot of fronts. The thing that my first worrisome moment though wasn't until the desert. I was fine up until then, but that whole desert thing was like, it felt like a joke to me almost, because he's laying down with the horse, but he's like 20 feet from them as they walk by. I mean, there's nothing in the desert but dunes. They don't see him? The mercenaries don't see him? Are you kidding me? And then when at some point, yeah, you're right. He gets ahead of them and he's laying down looking over a dune. And then finally they see him, but he's like 100 yards from them while they're pulling up to the dune that they're looking. It's just, it didn't make sense at all. And then he's riding his horse towards those buildings, and they're shooting at him with machine guns, and they're only like 100 yards behind him, and they're all missing. Are you kidding me? Like, if this is supposed to be real life, like that, I was like, I remember watching it in my head. I thought, okay, let it go. Just let it go, in my head, and this is the kind of movie where I feel like I could do that, but that was my first worrisome moment. Yeah.
Same. Like, there's so much luck involved because, of course, whenever he grabs a gun, he's a one shot, one kill kind of warrior. And it's just hard for me to buy into those moments. I try, and I do the same thing that you do, which is, this is not that kind of movie. This is Mission Impossible. It's, a popcorn action flick, but this is supposed to be like an elite attack force taking out another elite, attack force. And they all just get smoked, and this whole movie felt like there's just a little too much luck involved, right? Mm-hmm. Ethan hitting the gunman randomly by parachuting into the train. Okay. Right. The jump timing off the train of AI Gabriel, right, duo, that felt like a bridge too far. It just, yeah. And I get the implication is supposed to be, this is how good the AI is. In the moment, I didn't buy that. I was like, wait, they all need to set the table a little bit differently for that to really work. The boxcars and the piano falling perfectly on cue is really irritating. Ethan, for the entirety of this film, isn't forcing his will on the environment. He's just luckily escaping it.
Oh, that's a good way to put that.
So, yeah, the entirety of this film just felt like Ethan wasn't really overcoming. He was just escaping. And that's kind of frustrating. And I think a lot of it has to do also with the unmotivated storytelling. You didn't see that coming. In the rundown, I said motivated, but now I'm saying unmotivated. I did an Ethan. And so I felt like a lot of the storytelling was really unmotivated. I didn't really get the villain's motivation. He's motivated by what? He sees death as a gift. And that's kind of the end of it. Now, to be fair, a lot of Mission Impossible is just bad guys being bad. And that's kind of it. Most of it's usually like money. They just want to get paid and they don't care who gets the nuclear warheads. Now, I thought the last film did a really good job. We covered Fallout. I thought it did a pretty good job of creating a villain that had a flawed, but a worldview of how what they're doing is going to make an impact on the world in a good way. Flawed, very, very flawed, but it was enough to make me say, okay, they have a plan and an agenda that makes them out to be the good guy, that they're trying to do something that will be beneficial in the long run. Cool. And so, yeah, I didn't get Gabriel's thing. And then they make him to be an idiot. Mm-hmm. Gabriel just flat out announces the location and time of his big plan. Like, I'm going to get the key tomorrow on the Orient Express train that's leaving at 3:00 from Belgium or whatever. Like, he just tells everybody what he's going to do tomorrow. And it's like, wait, you want us to stop you? Like,
well,
is
this
a fetish thing?
Yeah, that one thing was like, okay, so he believes this so much,
right,
that he doesn't even care, and he's just going to tell everybody because he knows it's going to happen.
Yeah,
and then to be fair, it does.
It still does, but it doesn't make him out to be like a smarter villain, because as much as you might believe it's going to happen, there's no reason for me to think he should be announcing all his plans, because it now gets from AI knows all to this is destiny. And it's like, well, let's not tempt fate here. Instead, but from a storytelling perspective, it's bad. I think that's more important than justifying and excusing some characters' on-screen behavior Instead, it's just bad storytelling. Because this instead should have been pointed out by Ethan, right? He should have made a comment to Gabriel like, you're telling us what's going to happen. And now Gabriel gets to rebut like it is unavoidable, right? He gets to actually be more over the top about his confidence in AI as opposed to making the audience do all that work for him. That's bad writing. And I think the way they try to point this out is so much more muddier and dialogue-ier than it needs to be. There's just a clever... No, absolutely not. If they can get away with whatever they're doing, I expect to get to hand fist it myself. Right. And so, and the other thing, still on Gabriel here, he thinks Paris is going to betray him because Ethan spared her life. Like, at what point did this make any sense? Because he also has his back to her while she's doing all her stuff. If she's going to betray him and he really believes that, the last thing you want to do is get stuck on a train with her. Like, don't let her get that far. What are you doing? And he's trusting her to do all his dirty work still up until he just randomly decides you're going to betray me. Okay. It just doesn't make sense. But then she saves Ethan and says, Gabriel predicted I'd betray him, and voila. What are you talking about? No, Gabriel stabbed you and left you for dead. Then you saved Ethan. At best, it's a self-fulfilling prophecy. At worst, he's an emotional moron who can't read the room. Like, she literally just killed 2 people for you. At what point do you think she's going to now start betraying you? It just doesn't make any sense whatsoever. Yeah.
Great point. And her, like, at first I thought it was going to be a death scene, but then it wasn't. And then it was, that whole thing reminded me a lot of like the end of the Dark Knight, like the death scene at the end of the Dark Knight film. I was just like, what? And now that's not the actor's fault.
That's not absolutely not. Pom is incredible, does no wrong. McQuarrie, on the other hand, has a reckoning to do. Sorry, I'm not stopping anytime soon.
God, here we go.
And so, similar, the White Widow's motivation didn't quite line up for me either. She wants money, she wants friends, she wants to continue her mom's legacy. Why is she selling the key to a doomsday device? That doesn't make sense to me. Like, yeah, I don't know. It just didn't line up because she's so friendly with, Lark or whatever his name is supposed to be to her. And I love that she does use that as a point against him, right? She as she's betraying him or going against him, more like, is she's pointing out to him that she doesn't really know him, therefore she's not really a friend. That's a decent use of that, but her as her own entity, her own person, doesn't make a lot of sense in this world anymore for me. She's gone from being an information broker to a death dealer, and that it does not compute AI. And so, yeah, again, I'm not done. I got more corn in the tank, probably. And so there's a lot of inconsequential sequences throughout the film that also feel unmotivated, right? All the chases and getaways seem to ultimately be meaningless. Grace at the airport, is doing this cat and mouse thing with Ethan, and she gets away, gets to Rome, and immediately gets nabbed by Ethan. So we spent a fair amount of time on the whole airport thing, and she had a nice getaway only to just immediately end up with him anyway. Okay. And then there's this huge chase sequence through Rome, right? Paris recklessly trying to get Grace, and Grace escapes again. And then immediately in the next scene, it lands with Gabriel anyway at the widow's party. All right. Now you could say all of this is kind of this cat and mouse theater to establish Grace as being worthy of being on the team, but she really never does anything other than simple thievery. Ethan does everything else. And when it really counts at the end, she freezes, right, in the boxcar. Now, that's understandable for someone in that situation that is not accustomed to that situation. But ultimately, it's not also a good selling point for her being on the IMF. And so they kind of need to pick their lane here. Is this all kind of theatrics to get her to be a part of the team? And if so, I don't really understand the swap for her and Ilsa. It's not even a wash. It's a downgrade. Ilsa is like a certified badass spy killer who can do literally anything. And Grace is really good at taking things off of people. Okay. Like it's something, but it's nothing that literally anyone else on the team can do. I bet Benji could do that. And so it's just, I don't get the whole thing with her. It's just kind of an excuse to introduce a new character and that's it. And it's inconsequential is again, my big thing. And so throughout this movie though, I think there's the big Achilles heel for me is that there's no mystery. There's no sense of discovery. And even worse, there's no philosophical stakes. This is just an endless justification for action scenes with shoehorned emotional stakes, right? Grace does not deserve to be on the team. And instead of killing Ilsa, they should have killed Benji or Luther instead of her. And that way we really start to feel like, oh, this movie counts. This series, whatever happens between part 1 and part 2, it matters because they killed one of the core members of the team. Ilsa was never a core member of the team. She was a love interest that we had a love-hate relationship with in previous movies. Like she was always a sketchy one. We didn't really know what Ilsa was up to or what her motivation truly was. And that made her interesting. And now you've just kind of killed a question mark. That's not good. You need to kill a check mark. Like Luther and Benji, we know what the hell they're about. Kill one of them. And now we have it. We're introducing a new chaotic element into the franchise that makes us lean forward. Like we don't know what's going to happen next and who could go next. That's what you want out of a wrap up. And I'm assuming this part 1 and part 2 is a wrap up of this series. If not,
I think we have to assume that, right?
Right. Like he can't go until he's 70, can he? I mean,
yes, he can, but that's not the point. The point is that why have a part 1 and part 2?
Yeah.
That's the point.
That is the point. And so, yeah, I think instead, one, Ilsa's death should have, carried more meaning than it did. Ultimately, its meaning was it let Grace live. Someone that we don't know and don't really care about other than it's Hayley Atwell. Like anything apart from Hayley Atwell, we just don't care about. Yeah. I think what they could have done, right? All of this exposition and motivation could have been handled with more mystery and more demonstrations. Like the opening sequence was good because it's setting the table for what this AI is capable of. Use more of that to expand on what the AI is really doing. And instead, it's kind of these little cute sequences of it's impersonating Benji and it's taking over their communications. Okay, like, could it have been doing all of this entire time? Like this feels like a very lazy way for the AI to operate. And ultimately it could have crashed the plane that Ethan went on to get to Rome in the first, like in 1,000 other ways, the AI is more dangerous than what they're letting on. And instead they should have been making us work for every one of these sequences. Like getting to Rome could have been a sequence, not just being there and escaping, the henchmen. And so the opening of the submarine, great demonstration. There's a mystery to unravel in there. Instead, they spend 10 minutes explaining it in the next scene, which is boring. What are we doing? Another approach is to have Gabriel acting as the villain with an unknown motive. And now we get to have a big reveal is that he's beholden to a rogue AI. And by God, if they say rogue one more time, I'm going rogue and killing the IMF myself. This whole, now granted, this reveal still isn't as amazing just because it'll still feel a little bit cheap and a little played and predictable, right? The big reveal is a robot. Okay, amazing. But instead of making that this real grandiose thing, instead, you could tip your hat earlier on with Benji and Luther maybe debating about it being in an AI and arguing about the merits and the drawbacks, right? Mm-hmm. Debating about it being an AI could also be happening with Ethan and Kittredge, right? Building stakes and arguing about that as well. And now it doesn't become this big flourish that the audience feels shocked by. Instead, they're thinking about what are the implications? What are the philosophical implications of using an AI? And how is it going to be used now? And now you've set the table for something that we were already expecting because you're hinting at it the whole way through. And more importantly, you're wondering about what does this mean for Ethan and his team and Kittredge and his team? Because now we're at loggerheads. We have a real conflict that's been brewing this whole time. And instead, it's just Ethan running around footloose on behalf of Kittredge. And it doesn't make any sense. There's no real conflict in this movie whatsoever. It's some kind of revenge vendetta between Ethan and Gabriel for something that I don't even understand in the first place. There's no emotional stakes. There's no philosophical stakes. And there's no sense of interest and intrigue for the audience. There's no betrayal, right? No one really betrays anyone other than the bad guy betraying himself for stupid reasons we already covered. This is just a miserable failure because I conceptually, look, AI as a bad guy, I get it. There's lots of AI films already, and those are all great, right? If you want to go do whatever, Ex Machina, even artificial intelligence, and 1,000 others, even in recent years. And this, they just really magicked on to the timing of it. You know, over the last 6 to 8 months, we've been seeing so much about ChatGPT and artificial intelligence. We just over the last 2 months, we've had 2 strikes that have, in part, issues with the use of AI. And so this was a magically timed movie that he could not have predicted. And yet there's absolutely nothing interesting being said about AI, right? Why is this story necessary? What conversation is it bringing to the table? I think it could have a lot of interesting conversations, right? An AI weapon being turned against its creators, very cool, potentially. To me, whenever I start thinking about this conversation, it's saying, should the intelligence community fold up? Because if what they're doing is going to bring about the downfall of all of society, maybe what they're doing isn't ultimately a good thing or a necessary thing anymore. Like we've gotten to the point where governments are doing largely, really decent things if the intelligence community would stay out of it, if they'd stop usurping people's choices and, democracies. And so this seems like a really good opportunity for this franchise to invoke some introspection about the intelligence community itself. Instead of just fighting against bad actors, they should be thinking about what's our part to play in all this. Are we as a society and a worldwide community evolving away from the need of such an invasive apparatus as the intel community? How would an elite team think about their part with such an uncontrollable weapon, right? How does Ethan think about the part he's playing in this? How does Kittredge think about the part he's playing in this? We really don't know. It's just, this is all necessary, evils that we do. We're the arbiter of truth, to paraphrase what they were saying in the beginning. And having that kind of an argument is a really great way to roll out exposition, right? Ethan versus Kittredge instead of Ethan versus Gabriel. Because now all the exposition comes through conflict. And now we're beginning to understand what are the real stakes of this world. Now, maybe all of this is coming in part 2, but I suspect whatever happens in part 2 will just mean that part 1 could have been condensed into like a 20 to 30 minute, sequence and tacked on to part 2. And so nothing to my eyeball really happened interesting in part 1. So yeah, those are my thoughts.
Wow. Got a lot going on. No, I mean, I agree. And I think it's, you can shut your brain off and watch it as a film where, kind of a lot happens, but nothing really does at the same time. But, it's a good way to spend a couple of hours to just go to the movies and be wowed in some ways. But we've had that before, we've had action films before and we've watched Tom Cruise do action before. And I think that in this case, it was more about watching Tom Cruise do stunts than it was about watching a story, And as long as you know that that's what you're going to get, you know, then you could enjoy it. But if you're looking for a substantive story, you know, you're definitely not going to get it. And I think you're right when you said that they kind of lucked out with the whole AI thing, because obviously they made this film, you know, 2 years ago or something. They were working on it way before, you know, Chat GPT. I mean, we've had AI for a while. What we call AI, you know, is, I mean, it's not really AI. Like it is, but but we didn't have any of that when they were making this film. So I think that was a good luck of the draw for them, or maybe they saw it coming, and we can give them the props that, oh no, they saw this coming. And so, you know, but even then, if they didn't know what AI would look like, you know, in 2023 when the movie came out, the whole point of it is to go farther than what you think it might be, right? And I feel like you're right. You're totally right when you talk about, well, if he's flying on a plane from here to there, I mean, the AI should know that and crash the plane. Absolutely. Boom, done. You know, they could go to that extreme, and then there's a stunt right there, plane going down, and Ethan has to jump out of a plane without a parachute. How is he going to survive? You know what I mean? There's a stunt. So anyway, I can see those flaws for sure. That very well said, story-wise, about all that stuff.
And my frustration really is they didn't have to change a lot in order to make this a much more interesting, engaging film for the audience. And imagine having something with these action sequences where people walk out talking about the story.
Mm-hmm.
You've got a mega blockbuster on your hand, and they still do, but that's just because of the reasons that you said. Right. It's like, but this thing has legs for decades. If you can make people think on the exit, they go in for the action, they walk away and just, whoa, how do I feel about XYZ? Mm-hmm. That's much more interesting. Anyway, final thoughts, and yeah.
No, I don't have anything else. I think you said it all really well. I was, entertained yet let down at the same time.
Yeah.
So
they set a really good standard with Fallout, and that's where I'm holding them to now. Like, that's such a fun movie with something fun going on within the conversation of the film.
That was the one with Cavill, right? And the Halo jump.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Oh, yeah.
So what are you going to recommend this week?
This week I'm going to recommend, because I just can't get enough of it. It might be boring to some people, but to me, it's definitely not. I'm going to recommend the Tour de France, which is, I think, stage 15 or something now. So it's like 3/4 of the way done, but just watching these guys turn themselves inside out, it's like super amazing. And honestly, a lot of fun. And granted, some of the stages are like 4.5 hours long. So, you know, of just people riding their bicycles. So it could be boring, but when you understand it and you understand the tactics, it's incredible. So yeah.
Nice. I'm going to recommend Lust, Caution. I watched it last night for the first time. And if you want a spy thriller with something to say, my God. Now, it's a very graphic movie, sexually, and that's generally what it's known for. But it pays dividends, I think, because Ang Lee is on a different planet, and I get why. You know, I've seen some of his other films for sure, and he knows how to do drama. This is a different planet. I love watching period pieces, especially like in Asia. There's so many wild things happening in those countries during from the 1900s through the 40s. Like, it's really fascinating to see what their culture was going through, and then the visual styles. It's just beautiful film. Gorgeous. The lighting is to die for. And yeah, great film. 2.5 hours, a little bit shorter than Dead Reckoning Part 1. And just a great film, great acting, compelling, all the things. Yeah. So stay tuned for next week, where we will look at which one?
You're asking just because. Okay, cool. Yes, right. We have another week in between. I thought we were doing. Yeah. And so, Master and Commander.
Nice. Where we will look at Master and Commander. So stay tuned for that. And if you're enjoying the show, don't forget, subscribe, drop us a review, leave us a note. If there's something you want us to cover, or the kind of things you find interesting. Like we like to hear it all. And if you want to comment on this episode in particular, you can do that at thepestlepodcast.com/Mission Impossible DR1.
And our quote of the day is from Alex Garland. Sequels are generally done in a rush. They're done with a sense of urgency. The first time, you spend a long time developing to get it over the line. The second time, you don't. Your expectations are different and your motivations are different. I mean, that's with not just films, but with music and with pretty much anything. Second albums, really tell the tale of what a band is going to do. And I think that's definitely the case for films too. Yeah.
Yeah, that's Alex Garland is my favorite screenwriter. Speaking of Ex Machina, and a bunch of other stuff, 20 Days Later, The Beach, and not to say that everything he does is amazing. Everyone, takes a shot and misses. I'm okay with that. I just like his approach to thinking about sequels. And it's like Todd said, like we're aware that there's a slump when you're going into the second film or a sequel of any kind. And the time that you can take, it's hard to know when a project is ready. And sometimes it's about meeting a deadline. That's when you should step back. When it's about meeting a deadline, you're doing it wrong. It's just probably a good rule of thumb. Not every time, but a lot of times. And so I think it says a lot about what I think went wrong for this film. Just rushing, just saying, working backwards, right? Thinking too much about the action and not enough about the why. And if you can do both of those things, man, you're going to be doing something really special. And I thought, there's just a missed opportunity. Spend time developing, don't think about getting it over the line. Don't think about the payoff. And try your best not to think about Tom Cruise's biological clock ticking off the cliff, because that's probably also a big motivation. There's 5 years between this one and the last film. And so, at his age, I'm sure it starts to really get like, crap, my bones are creaking, based on all the stuff he's putting it through. I don't think on average being 60 is any kind of, death sentence at all. But I'm sure whenever you're doing the kind of life that he's living, it probably has a limit and you're probably starting to wear on yourself a bit. And so, yeah. Anyway, love Alex Garland. I love thinking about how is the best, approach to creating a sequel. I'm going to keep it to the same level of the first one. The more I think you can think about that, the better off you'll be in the long run. Yeah.
Well said. Awesome. Well, thank you guys for joining us. I hope you enjoyed this. Maybe you agreed with us, maybe you didn't. Let us know what you think. And share us with your friends, subscribe, review, all that good stuff. That all helps, it helps us. And if there's a film that you want to hear us pick apart, please let us know. Maybe we'll cover it one day. Until next week, I'm Todd.
I'm Wes.
Go watch some movies.
Trying to get away from this mountain.
That's right.
So good.